If you've ever taken language lessons in school or tried an app like Duolingo, your experience is probably the same. You memorized lists of vocabulary words, studied grammar, translated passages, wrote down conjugations. But doing all of this is inefficient for actually learning the language. First, these are all boring and tedious. Second, they often lack proper context. To show you what I mean, let's do a demonstration. I am going to show you some words in Chinese, Japanese, and Spanish. Tell me what they mean. So what was written? Oh, you don't know? Okay. Let's try it again. This time I'll show these words to you and pronounce them as well. Tell me what they mean. 我喝水,私は水を飲みます。yo bebo agua. So what do those mean? You still don't know? Okay, one last time, let me guide you. 我喝水,私は水を飲みます。yo bebo agua. Okay, so now do you know what these words mean? They mean I drink water. Did you understand that during the first, second, or third example? If you don't speak these languages, you likely only understood during the third example because I used gestures to display my intent. My actions gave you context, and context is king. The key to language learning is getting enough input with context, as well as doing enough output for practice. Input will build your passive vocabulary and comprehension, but output will build your active vocabulary and intuition. All this is the core of a language learning theory called Comprehensible Input by Stephen Krashen, where he teaches using this method to acquire a language. I'm going to break down topic by topic how and why this works, as well as how to get input and produce out. When you're memorizing lists of vocabulary words in your traditional language school, you often only have one piece of information, a direct translation. But in the example I gave you earlier, you have multiple pieces of information. You're exposed to the words themselves, you're exposed to the sentence order in which they go, the grammar of the sentence, my gestures that signal intent, you're exposed to my pronunciation, accent, and inflections all along the way. All of this information gives you context, and with enough context, you can comprehend the input. Comprehensible input means stuff you understand, and the easier something is, the more context you will have, and thus the more you will understand. This means that at the absolute beginner level, the best input is akin to the way a mother teaches her child. Lots of drawings and gestures coupled with easy sentences in order to signal intent. And no matter what your language level is, listening and seeing together are the absolute best form of input. As your language ability increases, you start to understand more abstract conversations, and maybe you don't need to watch us. There's still going to be physical context in the form of tone of voice, accent, and inflection, but the key to keeping input comprehensible is to already know most of what you are hearing. That way, when you do encounter a word or phrase you don't know, you can figure it out based on the context of the conversation. Okay, seriously, I can't tell you how many times I encountered a word I didn't know, but figured out what it meant 5 minutes later because all of that context gave me enough information to finally understand it. It's important to stay in the language as much as you can. If you watch a foreign show with native subtitles, your brain will use the minimum amount of effort to understand, so you'll tune out the complicated foreign language and just start reading subtitles. You need to force your brain to adapt. Even translating words too often can set you back. I've made this mistake plenty of times where I'm reading a passage and I translate right away and I go, oh, this word means X. But because I translated right away, I don't remember what means X. My brain focused on the English translation and meaning and completely dropped the foreign language and its context. You need to stop yourself from taking the easy way out. Being new to a language is a struggle, and when your brain is struggling, it's going to look for the easiest way to comprehend what it sees. And that means it will either look for patterns in the information it's being exposed to, or it will cheat by looking for direct translation. Seriously, just give it a try. Watch a show for a week and you'll find that you're able to understand certain parts and phrases simply because your brain wants to understand what it's seeing. And you're going to be able to find these words and phrases even if you didn't explicitly study them, or even if you can't explicitly define what they mean. Reading is important to do eventually, and it's excellent for picking up vocabulary since you can go at your own pace. but part of reading is internally subvocalizing the words that you come across. If you don't already have a good understanding of how they sound, you're going to reinforce poor pronunciation habits. So it's important to establish a strong framework of listening before you start reading. I'm suggesting a random number here, but try 50 hours of listening before learning how to read. That's approximately 2 months of watching a 1-hour episode of a show every day, which seems reasonable based on my past experience. And when you do start reading, again, stay in the language. By struggling to read a passage, you're going to focus more directly on the words themselves as well as the content. Like I said earlier, sometimes it takes reading a whole page to finally understand the first sentence because that whole backlog of context gave you enough information to decipher. And I gotta tell you, that not only feels great, but you tend to more strongly remember words this way because you associate it with that whole page of information. But this only works if you stay in the language. If you keep going in and out, your brain can't be bothered with the hearts. Languages flow. They have a sound and rhythm to them. It's just like music. If you listen to a song 1 time, would you be able to sing it back to me? No. How about 5 times? Well, you might know some parts. But what about your favorite song that you've heard 100 times? You can sing it back without even thinking about it. It's just intuitive. Now, it's true that you might be singing it a little bit wrong, and personal ability matters too. But since you already have an intuition for how it flows, you can read the lyrics 1 time and pretty much immediately correct what you were singing wrong. But the reverse case is not true. If you read song lyrics 100 times, you would still have no idea how the song sounds. After hearing it once, you would not be able to sing it back despite knowing the lyrics. That's because you didn't develop an intuition for the flow of the song. And you might even have weird pronunciation habits that you developed based on how you think it should sound. It might take you tens of listens to be able to sing along to the song with the proper rhythm and flow, which is actually pretty much starting at the beginning as any other song that you didn't know anything about either. Languages are the exact same way, but instead of being a 3-minute song, it's a 3,000-hour song. Listening is the most important skill that you need to develop, and most of your time, especially at the beginning, should be spent listening. No matter how complicated a foreign language may seem, it's still spoken by people with a variety of intelligence. You can speak a foreign language too. You just need to put in the time. And age is not an excuse. People often have this perception that children can pick up languages easier than adults, but I'm not so sure that's true. For one, babies spend years listening before they even try speaking. Now, of course, their brain is still developing, so it's not a completely fair comparison, but they're also fully immersed in a language environment at all times. And they're getting direct feedback and attention at every moment of their life. Kids don't just magically learn languages, just as they don't start magically talking about complicated subjects at 3 years old. When we speak to our children, we speak to them in a simple way so that they can understand. In reality, the way kids learn is in the same method that I'm trying to outline here. And as an adult, you have an advantage in that you don't have to learn many things conceptually, such as what is a bow or what is an idea. You just need to learn some cultural aspects of the language as well as how to express yourself in that way. Adults can learn languages perfectly fine and maybe even better because of our advanced pattern recognition abilities. Sometimes we tune in and out of what we're listening to, and in a foreign language, that little bit less context can be the difference between understanding or not. And when you don't understand, or if it's far too easy, far too hard, or just uninteresting to you, you tend to get boring and stressed and pay even less attention. That's not good because we want to be developing our listening ability. Of course, if it's far too easy, far too hard, or just uninteresting to you, you should probably find something else to watch, but sometimes you have to make do with what you got. A trick to help you pay attention is to do what's called shadow speaking. Shadow speaking is repeating what you hear as soon as you hear it. This is useful because in order to repeat something, you have to actually hear it, which forces your brain to pay closer attention. You can also only repeat what you understand. If you can't distinguish the words and phrases, you're going to be repeating back nonsense with awkward pauses. But for the stuff you do understand, it'll also help you gauge your own ability as well as develop your pronunciation. Allow me to do a quick demonstration. 最后因为伤势太严重，像是受伤太严重。I know what some of you are thinking. If shadow speaking helps me listen and pay attention, can I use it with my girlfriend? And you know, I don't think she'd like that, but you can try. Languages break grammar rules all the time. They use non-standard pronunciation for specific words and phrases and tend to pause and break after specific words. Many of these concepts are difficult to explain, but over time you'll understand it naturally as you see them used repeatedly. And by repetition, I don't mean studying these same phrases over and over again, but seeing them used in all kinds of different contexts to add your overall understanding of its use. Studying grammar isn't useless, but there often isn't a need for it. Rather than learning grammar first, look up certain parts of grammar later to help you clarify the patterns that you're already already used to seeing from all of your input. Think about it like this. Oftentimes when communicating, we aren't creating unique sentences. We may be repeating what our friends said, what our teachers said, something we heard from a show, and there are many phrases that are just common usage. Just by internalizing these phrases, we can participate in a large amount of conversations without ever studying proper grammar. For example, hey, how are you? Good. How about you? Not too bad. Any plans for this weekend? Not much, just relaxing. You? Same. Not the most exciting conversation in the world, but extremely common. And for someone learning a language, even be able to do that much is a huge success. Not to mention, several of these sentences didn't even follow proper English grammar. So in this case, if you barely knew the language and tried to reply using grammar rules instead of knowing the common phrases, they'll come across as stiff and awkward. Hello, how are you? Good. How about you? I too am doing well. Thank you for asking. Do you have any plans for this weekend? Not much, just relaxing. You? It is the same for me. Rather than focusing on grammar to build sentences with rules, focus on listening to actual conversations so you know how people really talk to each other. Incomprehensible input, or stuff you don't understand, is also useful. Say for example, you're watching a show in a foreign language, with no subtitles of course. Now, even if you don't understand enough to grasp the meaning, you're still exposed to the flow of the language. In the beginning, it sounds all mashed together because you can't distinguish words, but if you keep struggling with it, eventually you will adapt to the flow. And over time, as you adapt to the pace and pronunciation, you'll start to be able to distinguish individual words even if you still don't quite understand their meaning. Until now, we've talked entirely about input. Input will probably take up most of your time studying and is the ultimate method for building your passive vocabulary, but we still need to work on our active vocabulary. Output. The difference between passive and active vocabulary is what you can understand versus what you can use. There are going to be many situations in which you can understand, but you may not be able to speak in the exact manner of which you've heard. For example, you can attend a lecture by a professor and understand everything the professor said, but that doesn't mean that you're capable of giving that exact same lecture. This difference is due to what's inside of your immediate recall. And developing your recall is a different skill and method than to developing your comprehension. The best way to strengthen your recall is simply to use the language, and you should be doing this from day one of learning. Every time you use a word, you reinforce your own understanding of what it means. And when you get direct feedback, your conversation partner will understand you or not. You'll internalize whether its usage was correct. This is really effective because if you're anything like me, you will remember all of your mistakes. Okay, that was a joke, but seriously, don't be afraid to make mistakes in your language. Your partner will be infinitely happier that you're using their language badly as opposed to never even bothering to try. To help develop your recall, you can also make flashcards, you can use SRS apps like Anki, you can take random quizzes and tests online, you can start writing a journal or start keeping a vlog where you speak only in that language. But the optimal way is to actually just talk to natives. Use only your target language no matter how broken or wrong it is, and you'll be surprised at how quickly you can adapt. Just like anything else, actually using it is how words and phrases will cement themselves in your memory and become automatic. To give you an example, person A doesn't know anything about swimming. They just get in the water and over time, they just kind of figure it out and learn how to swim. Person B knows all of the theory about swimming in the world, but they never actually get in the water. If you put them in a race, person A is going to win the swimming race because they can actually swim. Person B has never even entered the water before. Now, if you give them enough time to practice, person B, of course, will overtake person A because that theory will become helpful in the future. But that's only if they actually get in the water. You have to get in the water. You have to actually use the language. Even though you might think of language learning as purely a mental skill, it's actually a lot more physical than you think. You are listening, you are talking, you are speaking, and there is muscle memory components in that. And learning mental skills versus physical skills are actually a lot more similar than you think. If you don't have friends to talk to in your target language, there's plenty of language exchange apps such as HelloTalk where you can meet and chat with random new people. Obviously, full immersion in the country of your target language is going to be the best opportunity to practice and receive tons of input, but that's just out of the question for most of us. Luckily, in today's age of technology, we can use the internet to make up for that lack of access. It is now possible to study a language 100% for free. All it takes is consistent time and effort. Let's summarize the method. Find language channels at your level on YouTube. Go on streaming services like Netflix and watch shows in your target language without putting on subtitles. Shadow speak to help you pay attention. Eventually, start reading while doing a minimal amount of translation. And then take those phrases and words that you've heard and use them in a real conversation with a friend or on a language exchange. As a supplement, you can take random tests online and make flashcards. Before you know it, you'll be having simple conversations in the language. And if you keep it up, you'll have finally achieved your dream of being fluent in another language.